Hello and welcome to the brand new podcast series, The Next Paradigm of Outsourcing by Next Time, where we bring you insights and advice on outsourcing from our experts across industries. The topic that we'll be discussing today is reflections on Australian BPM landscape. Organizations operate in a complex environment of rapidly changing market demands, growing regulatory requirements, and an ever-changing technology landscape. Digitization of business and rising customer expectation has led to a fast-paced, hyper-connected market, making operational processes increasingly critical. Companies that do a good job of concentrating on their core mission know that they cannot afford to be distracted by all the factors involved in serving a growing marketplace. Currently, the Australian BPO industry is worth $42.3 billion and has been noticing a steady growth of 2.3% year on year. This episode will emphasize on how outsourcing can be a viable solution for companies that can leverage to manage their businesses. In this episode of our podcast series, we'll focus on the Australian BPM landscape. We have Dr. Martin Fahy with us today to present his views with a more precise viewpoint on the BPM market in Australia. Dr. Martin Fahy is the CEO of the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, the peak policy, research and advocacy body for Australian superannuation industry. With over 3 decades of experience, Dr. Fahy has worked in a consulting and advisory capacity in the US, Europe, Middle East and Africa and APAC. He is a recognized thought leader in the field of shared services, BPO and finance transformation. Welcome, Dr. Martin. It is a pleasure to have with you today.
Thank you very much, Karthik.
So, Dr. Martin, according to you, what is the current state of the BPM industry in Australia?
I think COVID and its aftermath has really highlighted to firms the need to rethink their service delivery models, Karthik. There was a growing recognition that work is very often fungible, that it is possible to atomize in industrial processes, and that the role of digital, and in particular the importance of service providers and partners in augmenting firms' capability, extending that capability. And so through COVID, I think organizations that might have been slightly reluctant have recognized the role of remote and virtual teams, and that they see these as playing a key role in driving competitiveness. And so the market is maturing, and I think there's a renewed focus on cost out, digitization, and driving greater resilience.
According to the sources, there has been a shortage of talent in Australia related to specific skill sets of industries. Do you see outsourcing as one of the ways to address this issue? And how would the Australian BPM industry manage this expectation?
No, absolutely, Karthik, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. What we know is that as a result of the COVID lockdowns in Australia, which were particularly severe, large numbers of temporary migrant visa holders went back to Europe and other countries, but we also saw a very significant 2 to almost 3 year pause in net inward high skills migration. So as a result of that pause in inward migration, the estimates are that by 2030, the population of Australia will be 750,000 to 1 million people lower than projected. Now that doesn't seem a lot by Indian standards, but in a country with 23 million, 24 million of a population, to be missing 1 million high-skilled workers has a profound impact on the workforce planning, on talent management and on the wider labour market, and we're currently experiencing a real talent crunch here. I think large organizations are looking to their established service providers and new service providers. They're also looking to automation. They're looking to new service delivery models, using their BPO partners to try and address these pressing shortfalls in talent. And it's become a real crisis moment. It's augmenting inflation and it's making life very difficult. So as you said, I think organizations do see outsourcing as one of the ways to address this talent issue. And I think they're looking to the BPM industry here and its service providers to try and meet some of these expectations.
Dr. Fahy, a lot has been called out of the carbon rating. How is the BPM industry assisting CXOs of global organizations with this requirement of carbon reporting? What's your thought on that?
I think climate change reporting and the commitment to net zero 2050 is going to give rise to a really significant data collection, measurement and reporting imperative. So at the moment, if we think about finance and accounting, and I think the obligations around carbon reporting and climate risk reporting will fall primarily to the CFO finance function as part of the integration of sustainability standards into the broader international accounting standards framework. And so what I think is that the finance function in particular, but more broadly, capital markets and the investment and funds management industry really is faced with a really big uphill challenge as to how we're going to create a parallel mechanism for reporting carbon liability, carbon exposures, carbon abatement, and carbon as an asset. And so BPO providers, specifically those with strong F&A heritage and credentials, can play a crucial role in helping these firms meet these obligations in this important area. So I think it's an enormous opportunity for BPO providers. I think those that have got strong heritage in F&A can play a real role, and it opens up, I think, a whole new trust and area where we're going to need expertise. And it's not just going to be, across the commercial firms, but right across the superannuation and pension industry, right across funds management. We're going to see this need, and I think BPO, and in particular the Indian-based BPO providers, are well placed to deliver and offer support in that area.
What's the significance of digital transformation, and how important is it to have strategic partners to drive the digital strategy? What's your thought?
I think it's important that firms look to their BPO partners, BPM, to provide the core insights, the thought leadership, and the capability to deliver digital transformation. I don't think I think it's one thing to build awareness within the firm. I think it's it's important to have high level strategic ownership of the digital strategy and the roadmap. But ultimately, when it comes to execution, when it comes to getting the scale effects, when it comes to addressing the difficult issues around building infrastructure, tapping into the talent and addressing cyber and other issues, then large-scale experienced technology providers, and in particular BPM providers who've been doing it for decades, really can play an important role. With the rise of AI and all the publicity we see around ChatGPT, firms are now alive to the possibility of these technologies. And I think the smart firms are looking to their BPO partners, not as they have had historically for labor arbitrage, but if you like, for technology innovation. And so looking to the established capability in offshore locations where we've had experience with robotic process automation, we've had experience with deploying large-scale automation and technology solutioning, and where there's real deep tech expertise. And so I think firms should be cautious about what they hold on to. They need to hold on to the strategy. They need to identify what it is they're trying to achieve with this technology. But ultimately, in terms of execution and in terms of building out the solutions and deploying those solutions, I think they need the scale that the BPM providers can bring, but also the fact that they can do it at a much lower cost because of the pooling of infrastructure and other assets. So I understand the urge to do these things in-house, but I think history has shown that building large in-house IT capability, whether it's in ERP, data warehousing, whether it's at the front-end infrastructure, or even in cyber, increasingly where we end up with technology as a service. And I think that applies to digitization and digital transformation. Why not just take the opportunity to leap over the technology and take digital transformation as a service from your BPM partner?
Do all the past disruptions and future expectations call for an overhaul of the BPM operating models, Dr. Fahy? What's your take on that?
I think we learned a lot over the last number of years in terms of many of the early deals were about building confidence. They were about harvesting labor arbitrage. They were about understanding better the capability in terms of vendor management, the as a service. I think the industry is now unrecognizable to what it was 5 years ago. It's completely unrecognizable to what it was 10 years ago. And I think in 5 years' time, BPM will be technology enabled. It'll be about genuine strategic partnerships. And I think it'll be about contracting for outcomes. I don't think it'll be about contracting for inputs. It'll be about contracting for outcomes. And those outcomes are going to be fundamentally tied to driving down costs, building capability from digital transformation. And, I think the success that Australian organizations have had with BPM-based providers in India speaks volumes to that.
Thank you, Dr. Fahy, for giving us an informed perspective on reflections on the Australian BPM landscape. I'm very sure that all our listeners must have benefited from these insights. Thank you everyone for listening in. If you have any questions or have suggestions for future topics, please do write to us at thinknext@nextstep.com. You all have a great day ahead. Thank you, Dr. Fahy, once again. Bye bye.